Alright, welcome to the first episode in the Swiss Army Truck series, and in this video series I'm going to show you how I went about building the ultimate tool truck. So, of course, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find yourself a truck. Now this, I just found this on Craigslist in Flagstaff and I bought it. I just liked it. Now it didn't have a bed. It just had this, those pieces of wood there that you can see. And because this truck has dualies, this is an extra large truck. So the advantage of that is I can actually put a bed on here and still have 31 inches between the back of the cab and the start of the bed, and I can actually widen the bed by an extra 12 inches. So that's what's nice about this big truck. So once you found yourself a nice big truck that you like, that you're going to be happy with, next thing you want to do is make sure your truck is ready. Now this is a Siren. This is original from the 1960s. This is a 1967 Ford F350, by the way. So this is kind of neat. So I can actually pull a knob and turn this Siren on. So just excess, you know how it is. So this truck is having some problems with the valves. So I pulled the heads off. The cylinders are actually perfectly good. These cylinders and the rings, these are in perfect condition, so I'm not gonna touch those. Those are beautiful. I did a wet and dry compression test, and those readings came out exactly the same. So you'll notice, of course, I have a little bit of coolant on these pistons. That's okay. I soaked all this in motor oil. After I got the heads off, I make sure that I put oil on all those cylinders, and I turned the engine over a few times to make sure that oil was wiped up and down the cylinder wall, so that coolant shouldn't cause any rust. And this won't be apart for very long anyway. Once I get those heads back, I put this together, I'm gonna fire it up and run it, and this should be good to go. The brakes were good, actually. I got the truck, I bled the brakes, and ever since they've been the best brakes I've ever had on a vehicle. There are 4 drum brakes all the way around, front and rear drum. This is a 352. This is not a 390. I believe in 1967, when this truck was made, the largest engine you could get was a 352. I don't think they actually had the 390 at that point. And of course, it has factory 2-barrel carburetor. I'm going to keep that factory carburetor. You can see it there in the window, just because, I don't know, I like factory. I don't know. I mean, I am building a custom tool truck, but I don't know. I don't want 4-barrel speed and power. That just seems like too much. I just like the, just like, oh yeah, the engine's all original. It's just, I don't know, that's just how I am. So whatever works for you. And so here, this is actually the T18 4-speed manual. With this has the granny low first gear in it. I'm not exactly sure what ratio that first gear is, but it could be 6.68 to 1. I'd have to double check on that. If I remember to double check, I'll mention it, but that's a real low first gear. Normally you actually take off in second gear. So of course you could do an automatic truck if you wanted. That's just personal preference. I think a lot of people prefer manual, but you could just as easily go automatic for convenience. And also with the automatic you get a little bit of a torque multiplication when the vehicle is not moving. When you're pushing the gas and the vehicle's not moving. But that, again, that's personal preference for you. The next thing I got here was this bed. This bed is off a 1966 Ford. I believe it was an F100. I'm not sure. And I really like the ladder rack on here. This is, of course, a custom ladder rack that somebody somewhere built. But I think it's really neat. All the welds on that ladder rack are still good. So, and it looks pretty cool, even if I'll most likely never use it because excess, so this was the first thing I wanted to do, is of course put a bed on it so I can move stuff with the truck. So I can actually, like I said, widen this bed 12 inches in that direction, and I'll offset the bed to the driver's side. I don't want to make it symmetrical. I think what I'll do in that 12-inch gap that I make inside of here, when I widen it, I'll actually probably put a compressor in there. So I'll have a regular full-size truck bed in addition to all kinds of bells and whistles. And I'll probably have quad tail lights. I'll reuse these bed tail lights, and I'll continue using the ones that I have just because why not. So, and then I got here for an air compressor setup, I got this air tank. This is from 1972. This is 3/16-inch thick steel, the walls on this tank. So actually, I mean, if you look at that on a ruler, I mean, it's thick steel. And this actually was on a setup that was running, I think, 225 psi. It says max 250 psi on the tank. So of course this is way more than I'll ever use, so that should be perfectly good. And then of course, with any tool truck, it's always handy to have a bench vise, something, you know, you can horse stuff down in so that you can actually wrench on it without having your whatever it is you're wrenching on actually moving around. So that's super handy to have, and of course a lot of tool trucks have that. The other thing I got here, I had this a lot longer than I had the truck, actually. This is a 7.5 kilowatt Onan generator. And despite the fact that this is branded Cummins, this is actually a 3-cylinder inline diesel Kubota motor. This is I believe it's the Kubota KD05. I'd have to double check on that, the serial on this engine. But even though this says Cummins somewhere on here, this is branded Cummins by Onan. It is actually a Kubota motor. So this with the 7.5 kilowatts, you can do quite a lot with that. That'll run like, you know, 3-4 houses at once. I mean, you can have, you know, 4 microwaves running at once, no problem. Even a higher power microwave. So I can shove this on there, then I can actually do welding wherever, I can have lights wherever, I can have a microwave wherever, I can power anything at any time. All I got to do is pull up in the truck and boom, I have power. And one of the things about this particular motor, this Kubota, these will run forever. I mean, you can expect a life in the hundreds of thousands of hours, even if you don't really maintain the engine properly, even if you're neglectful and you know forget to change the oil. People have done that. People have abused these motors and they have lasted for hundreds of thousands of hours. Now, of course, I'm not encouraging you to abuse a motor as beautiful as this. I'm merely stating the fact that this motor can take a lot. I mean, you put fuel in it and it'll just purr along happy just for days on end, continuously. So this will be super handy to have. This thing weighs like 500 pounds. I mean, this is like really massive. So this is going to be fun to figure out a way to actually lift that onto the truck. I'm still not quite sure how I'm going to do that. And again, we're coming back to personal preference. You might not want a generator this big. You might not think you'll need it. You might want gas instead of diesel. It's whatever you want to do. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time to get a good deal on this generator. And so, of course, I said, well, yes, I have no idea what I'll do with it. Absolutely, I'd love to have it. So I bought the generator and brought it home with basically no idea what I wanted to do with it. I just knew that it was a monster and I wanted it. So, I mean, the price was definitely right. So, and actually this generator, there's not really a whole lot you could do with it portability wise. It's not really a traveling generator. This actually came out of a motorhome. So, I mean, you're going to have a big truck like I have to kind of move this, otherwise it's really not going to move. Something like this would actually make a fantastic backup for your house if you want to have backup power for your house. So, of course, if it's up to you whether or not you want a generator and what size you want. However, I will point out, even though that this is 7.5 kilowatts, this will not run a stick welder. You can get this to weld stick, but only the really small stick electrodes that they make. Only the very smallest electrodes, which you kind of have to have a lot of skill to run one of those really small electrodes. So you're better off just getting a wire welder and calling it a day. So if you want to stick weld, you're gonna need more than 7.5 kilowatts, strangely enough. And I wouldn't really, if you ever see one of these, grab it, because they're hard to find. I don't think you'd have much luck if you specifically went out to find one. They're very difficult to find. There's like one Onan service yard in like all of Tucson that I am aware of. So whether or not they even have a generator that they'd sell you, I don't know. Next, we got air compressors to, of course, put air in our air tank. And you got a couple of options here. Now, if I had really wanted to, I have a spare V-belt on my engine, and I actually could have bolted one of these compressors somewhere under the hood and ran a V-belt to it. But I wasn't particularly fond of that idea, just because, I don't know, I have a 2-barrel carburetor that's factory, and I just want to don't want to take any more power that I don't have. So the other thing you could do, of course, is these compressors in particular, these exact ones, are actually run off electric motors. Now, if you had a generator, you could run these off an electric motor. And that would be an easier system to set up. All you got to do is once your tank reaches pressure, you just have a little switch that shuts off, turns off the electric motor, you're done. The only problem with that is, of course, you have to fire up a big beefy generator to run your compressor, but you could very easily do that if you wanted to. Now, for me, I don't think I particularly like either of those ideas. I prefer the idea of gross excess. You see, I like more engines than is ever necessary. So I'm going to get a separate engine to drive one of these compressors. I'm actually going to do the bigger one here, I think. This small compressor actually would be really handy for something portable. It's adorable. And these have relatively low hours on them because they came out of some industrial thing. And I'm not entirely sure how that thing worked. So now these are two-cylinder single stage. And now the problem with single stage is you don't get up to quite as high a pressure as two-stage. So that's something you want to consider. Normally, if you come across a single stage compressor, it's not going to go up to as high of a pressure. Now these actually might go up to a higher pressure because if you look at my governor here, I didn't adjust this. So these, actually that little tiny blue one, the smaller compressor, was actually set at 230, it looks like, PSI. So even though these are single stage, these can actually get up to a pretty high pressure. I don't think I'd ever really want 225 or 230. I would probably go with something like 150 to 175, somewhere in that range. I have yet to decide. So, but I know that these compressors should be more than capable to getting up to that pressure. So that's something you want to consider when you're thinking single stage or two stage. Also, because these are single stage, both pistons actually push air into the tank. So theoretically, you should get a slightly larger volume of air, more cubic feet per minute, if you will, because instead of having one cylinder push into the second cylinder and then having the second cylinder push to the tank, both cylinders are pushing to the tank. So it's air to the tank, instead of air to the tank. So you get, for one revolution, you get 2 charges of air into the tank versus every revolution getting 1 charge of air to the tank. However, most two-stage compressors actually have really, really large primary cylinders so that you kind of make up for that. You kind of get a larger volume. So, and I actually don't know the CFM rating on these compressors, but looking at the size of the cylinders and using my imagination, this seems like this should be enough to handle what I want to do. And I'll run these on a gas motor, so these will be nice. Tangent, I bought a different transmission. This is actually a NP435 with a Chevy bolt pattern. Only made for 4 years, 1968 to 1972. So of course, Murphy's Law, I buy a rebuilt new process, and it's a Chevy bolt pattern, which all the people on the planet that are looking for one of these that can't find one, and of course I have one and I can't use it because I have a Ford, I'll probably just actually rebuild the T18 that I have. So I have an unsynchronized first and reverse. That's fine. Adventure. So I'll probably rebuild it because the synchronizers are really worn out. So just in case you're wondering what the transmission is for. Also, I have a bunch of fire extinguishers that I've acquired over the years. I may or may not bolt one of those to the truck. I don't know. I don't know if I have space for this frivolous nonsense, In case you're wondering what gas engine I'm going to use to drive my compressor, more than likely I'm going to use this guy here. This is a 5 horsepower flathead Briggs. It's your standard Briggs & Stratton that they've manufactured for like 120 years or whatever, 5 horsepower. And also, just a fun note, if you're ever working on a Briggs & Stratton engine, you have to have this cover plate, and let me tell you why. This cover plate here, it has on the one side the serial number for the engine. It has the here we go, model, type, code. Probably can't read that. This is very, very, very important. If you don't have this cover that redirects the air over the engine, you won't have this model number. And to my knowledge, this model number is not anywhere else on the engine. And if you don't have the model number, you're gonna have a hard time finding parts. Basically, nobody will help you out if you don't have the model number. If you go to the Briggs & Stratton website, the first thing they ask you is to punch in the model number. If you don't have it, you're SOL. They made probably 100 different models that had 5 horsepower, you know, however many, you know, 200 cc's or whatever it is, and all of them are slightly different. So just because you can say, oh, it's a 5 horsepower, however many cc's, doesn't really help you out. It's kind of a pain in the butt. Now, I also have this single cylinder overhead valve Tecumseh motor, and I might consider using that because the overhead valve, you can actually get a higher compression with this engine, and so you produce more horsepower. Maybe, you know, not as great torque to horsepower ratio, maybe not as much torque overall, but you definitely get more horsepower with the overhead valves because you can get a higher compression. By comparison with a flathead Briggs or with a Ford flathead or any flathead, you can't really get as high compression because, of course, your valves are on the side. So you have your piston and your valves are next to it. And so the combustion chamber is on top of the piston and on top of the valves. Whereas with an overhead valve, instead of having it, you know, this wide to accommodate for piston and valves, you can actually make it less wide and have the valves on top of the piston so that you have, you know, much smaller combustion chamber and you get a much higher compression. That's just a thought. But I like the standard Briggs & Stratton, so I'll probably use that one. I also have this cute little guy. I believe this is a 3 horsepower, 127 cc's, and actually it says right on here, I can tell you, yeah, 127 cc's. What is this? 3 horsepower. Yeah, it does say on there, 3 horsepower. This one probably doesn't have enough power to run my compressor. This is a little bit too small. Even the 5 horsepower is kind of pushing it. I might be asking a little bit much of this engine, but I don't know, you just open up the carburetor and call it a day, it'll be fine. This is the evaporator and a blower from a Chevy Corvair. This is the, you know, underdash air conditioning. Yes, at some point I will put air conditioning on the truck, because air conditioning, you know, I'm in Arizona. I mean, Tucson, just this summer, it got up to like 120 degrees in Tucson. So, of course, I don't want to play with that kind of heat. So I probably won't use this evaporator, but I probably will use that blower, and I'll just get a smaller evaporator from, you know, like, I don't know, like a Dodge Dart or something. You can go to O'Reilly and order parts. I'll just find a really small, cheap evaporator. I'll get something new for, you know, 20 bucks, and I'll build a box, I'll throw it under the dash, and I'll use that blower. So I'll have under dash air conditioning on the truck. And I'll probably reuse lines if I can find any decent looking lines. I'll reuse those, and I'll probably buy a rotary compressor because you can get those pretty cheap. So eventually, not anytime soon. And of course, the most important part of any work truck is the toolbox. Now, as you can see by my hand here, this box isn't particularly large. I probably won't keep all of my tools in the truck, but, you know, a large number of them. I like this box because of the shape and the fact that I can bolt it to the truck. This one goes well with bolting. A lot of toolboxes there aren't really built for, you know, drilling holes in them and bolting, and they wouldn't be quite right. This one, because it's tall, is a little bit better for that. It's a little bit more designed to be stationary mounted, and also it's not very wide, so it'll fit nicely in the truck. In addition to this, I'll get a couple of large boxes, you know, like real big, with a door on them, so I can actually keep like a propane tank on the truck and stuff like that. So this will just keep most of the smaller stuff, and anything bigger I won't, you know, occupy one of my big drawer spaces with. I'll actually put it in a cupboard. So, you know, like your penetrating oil and your motor oil and stuff, I'll shove in a cupboard. So this is going to be almost exclusively for tools. Just for me, I like the size of this, and also it has a handy top on it, so you can actually, you know, put stuff on top and work on it, which is standard of most floor toolboxes. And finally, I got this sink. I'm really excited about this. As you can see, this is almost like a 1 cubic foot basin, approximately. You can see by my hand. This is small, so this is perfect for the truck. I also like it has this really, really tall faucet on it, you know, so you have lots of space to wash parts or wash your hands. You know, you're not squishing your hands back in there. So this, because of the size of the sink, you probably cannot find a smaller sink, and you probably won't find a smaller sink with a taller tap on it. So this is absolutely perfect. I'll get an water tank, and I'll stick it underneath of the truck, and I'll have just a water pump to run some water up to this sink. So this is beautiful. Another thing I like about this is actually 29-pound cast iron. So this sink is like from the 1930s. You can see it's actually cast iron, and you can see it has porcelain on it. So that white this is actually the porcelain. So I'll clean this up, and there's not a chip on that. So this sink is perfect. It's like pristine. It could not be better for my application. Quick side note, my exhaust system, my entire exhaust system is held up by a single piece of barbed wire, and then the other end of this exhaust system is actually supported by the manifold in there. So, and yeah, this is just rusted through. I'm probably going to leave that. I'm not actually going to fix this and mount this properly, because why would I? Barbed wire, it's beautiful. So make sure you click the like button if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed the idea of building a tool truck. Make sure you throw a comment, give me your ideas, let me know what you think I should do with the truck. So tune in next episode, and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do to this bed. I'll make the wheel wells fit the dualies, and I'll show you how I'm going to modify this bed, how I'm going to make it work, how I'm going to bolt it down, and I'll go over some of that stuff in the next episode, so stay tuned.